Hello and welcome back to Sikich Live. I know I've been gone for a couple of weeks here now, so glad to be back and interviewing our guests on all things Salesforce. Each Tuesday at 1 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, we have our special Salesforce edition of Sikich Live. So make sure to tune in at this time each week for new and exciting updates about what's going on in the Salesforce world. Again, thanks so much for being here. Today we're talking all things data migration. But before I bring Matt on, who has been a wonderful presenter and live guest for us in the past, so you will probably recognize him. But before we bring Matt on, I need you to do 3 things for me, okay? So need you to like this video ASAP. Just click that like button. That's like right down there. Make sure to subscribe to our page on whatever platform that you're seeing us on, whether that's Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn. And then number 3, go out there and vote. Take some time today. It's a beautiful day. It's like 67 degrees in Chicago in November, so it's a great amount of time to wait in line to vote and get that civic duty in. Thanks so much. Okay, so don't be shy on Sikich Live, like we always say. We want to make sure that you're asking questions to our guests that we have on here. So if you have questions about Salesforce, or you're currently going through a data migration with another partner, or perhaps you're doing it yourself, make sure to ask those questions, get your answers answered live. That's why we're live. That's why we're here to connect with all of our users on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Excellent. So Matt, I'm going to bring you out here. How are you, Matt? How are
I'm good.
things?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, of course. So Matt, we are talking all things data migration today, right?
Yes, we are. Okay.
So this can sometimes be a difficult topic to start with because data migration, it's different for so many different organizations. Sometimes we have much smaller organizations with smaller file sizes and things are a lot easier. Their data is already really clean, which, you know, we hope that's the case, but it's not always. And then sometimes we're working with enterprise groups that have huge databases that have to get moved over. That takes a lot of time. So sometimes it's daunting, sometimes it's not. So I just want to talk very generally, why is migrating data so difficult into a new CRM system?
So there's a number of reasons why. One of them is a different database design. and we can go into these a little bit more, but you've got different database design. You've got to prepare the data and clean the data. You've got data loading issues. I mean, you load the data and you got to test it. You've got flat out data issues. And, also people underestimate how much time it takes. And those are really the 5 main things that I see, and just in talking to organizations, because I'm just moving data from here to there. It ain't that big a deal. Well, and we can talk through that.
So with different database design, can you give some more examples of what you mean there exactly?
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever moved. I mean, physically, like going from an apartment to a house to a bigger house, or bigger house to downsize, whatever. First of all, what are the problems with moving? 1, it's a pain. Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm done moving. 2, what fit in that room in that house may not fit in this room in this house, because they're different. Okay. So when you look at these different database designs, they're not designed the same way. So let me just give you an easy example. In Salesforce, there's something called activities, and an activity is a phone call, an email. It could be a task, or it could be an event. Meaning, I'm going to meet with somebody next Tuesday at 3:00, or it could be I need to follow up next week. I already did it, or I've got an email. Well, in other systems, they may have separate objects for meetings versus tasks versus emails. So they may have 3 objects where we have 1. Okay, that's just an example, and I could talk forever on that one, but those are just, whenever you're going from one system to another, chances are the database does not match. So there needs to be a process to really go through and figure out, okay, where's that data going to go?
Sure. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but one of the biggest issues that at least I've seen working with clients and hearing from our team about what clients are struggling with and their pain points is this worry that their data isn't clean, right? Mm-hmm. How do people go about cleaning it, preparing it? What does that look like? What does it mean also for data to not be clean?
Yeah. So when you talk about data not being clean, so there are a number of things around preparing and cleaning data. So let's dive into that. So let's talk about preparing data. So when you think about loading data into a CRM, you want to have a list of all your companies, and then you want to have a list of all your contacts. And those contacts need to be associated to those companies. And then you're probably going to load past maybe opportunities that are going to be associated to either the contact or the company. Then you're going to load activities, which could be associated to the opportunities, the contacts, or the company. Well, in terms of preparing this data, 1, when you do an export out of your existing CRM system, it may not come out in a way that makes it easy to upload that into Salesforce from a spreadsheet. Some of the links may be gone. You may not have all of your opportunities in one spreadsheet, or all of your contacts in another spreadsheet. So as you export this data, there's oftentimes prep work that needs to be done to get the data into the right format so it can be uploaded. Then you've got cleansing. So when you think about cleansing, how many companies do you have with no address? How many companies do you have with, let's just take the state of Illinois. They could have it as capital I, capital L. They could have it as ILL. They could have it as Illinois. They could have it as Illinois spelled wrong. Okay. So if you want to do a report or a view of all my clients in Illinois, what are you going to search on? Okay. So that all goes into the prepping the data so that when you want to actually take action on the data, you can. And, another one that I've always had fun with, and I'm based here in Cincinnati, is I want to run a report of our Cincinnati clients. Well, that should be easy, right? Well, if they live in a suburb of Cincinnati, Mason, I got to add Mason to my filter. I've got to add all these different suburbs. So again, that all goes into stuff that needs to be thought out before you load that data in.
And one thing I think of very quickly about cleansing, maybe this isn't exactly related to cleansing, but I'm just curious. The amount of custom objects, custom fields, all of those things sometimes there's too many options, too many things that we're putting out here. Then we just have a list of way too many things that we really don't actually need, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. There's oftentimes a lot of, especially when we look at systems that they're using today, where they've added 100 custom fields and they're not using them.
Yeah,
they may be using 5.
Yeah.
And there's a utility in Salesforce. And now that I'm talking about it, I can't remember. You can run it against your database, and it shows you every field and how many total records on that object and how many times that field is being used. And when you run it, you realize a lot of these fields that I put out there because they're going to help me, they make it worse. So,
absolutely, yeah. It can be like I'm trying to map things, and I'm like, oh no, I have a million things I got to look for. So, definitely simplifying that is something I recommend, at least working in CRM systems so much.
Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about data loading. What challenges do you see there with data loading, as it kind of seems pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. You just load it in and it works, right? Well, when you think about loading data, and there's an association between the record you're trying to load and another record in the system, you have to oftentimes, we use Excel a lot, and perform a VLOOKUP where we're trying to load a record and associate it to an ID on another record. Okay, so now I'm old. I started using CRM back in 1995, back in the Goldmine days, and I love Goldmine. Anybody who wants to talk Goldmine, love to talk to them, right? Even though we don't do it anymore, but I still love my Goldmine. The issue we had, though, back in the day was that if I had an opportunity against ABC Company, and ABC Company changed their name to XYZ Company, and I exported all my data out of Goldmine, that opportunity would be associated to ABC Company. But ABC Company doesn't exist anymore. So it didn't have referential integrity at the database level, where if you change the company name, the association, the opportunity automatically changes. So when we get data out of whatever system you've got, the fact it doesn't come out clean, and it needs to be prepared, but then you need to associate every record to another record. Now, if you're just loading businesses first, you're going to load businesses, and we'll get into that in a minute, but that'll load. But then I want to associate the contact to that person. And that's where things can get a little squirrely, especially once you go from contacts to opportunities to activities to cases to custom objects. There's a lot of lookups that need to be done, and the ability to match on all those is challenging.
Absolutely. So continuing on with this, why is migrating data so difficult? We talk about data issues, right? That's kind of a broader general term, but what are those most common data issues? Getting a little more specific.
So I've been on Salesforce for 14 years. My database is 14 years old. Okay? I've got contacts in there that worked at a company that have been gone for 10 years. But I'm not going to spend my time just chasing people. I mean, so I got a bunch of old data. Determining what data to bring over. I mean, one of the challenges is when you think about, okay, I'm going to move this data, I'm going to clean it, I'm going to prepare it, and boom, I'm over in Salesforce. That's great. How are you going to keep it clean? How are you going to keep it up to date? That's another thing. Let's talk duplicate. Duplicate contacts, duplicate companies. So here in Cincinnati, a very large employer is Procter & Gamble. So how do you put Procter and Gamble in the database? Procter space A&D space Gamble, or Procter space ampersand space Gamble, or P space ampersand space G. They're known by all three here in town. So when you start to look at your data, you could have multiple companies. Let's talk about people. John Smith worked at P&G. John Smith now works at Kroger. Well, am I adding a separate record so I have the same person in there twice? Where do they work now? Okay. So when you look at your data and you're pulling it out, part of setting it up in CRM is you want to have a duplicate checker that can proactively notify you. As I'm typing in John Smith, and go, hey, I think there's a John Smith in here right now. And you can look and go, nope, different. Or, yeah, same. Okay. But then you also, based upon the size of your database, can have something running in the background that can constantly be looking for dupes. And when I say that, you may have a couple integrations every night that are bringing data in, and there might be, a lot of different data coming in, and you want the ability for the system also to identify those dupes for you. And then also you need to have data stewardship. How are you going to keep this data clean? How are you going to keep it accurate in terms of, with people going to different companies, what are you going to do there? And, an interesting idea is for a larger deployment, they may benefit where data is very important from a marketing standpoint and from a customer standpoint to have a full-time data steward. That person could be offshore in Philippines or wherever, but full-time going through LinkedIn and just seeing where people are and updating your database. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to do it other than to have your users do it. But oftentimes I'm busy on other things and I just don't have the time to go in and track that this person left and went somewhere else.
Right. So putting this all together, how much time does this really take to do these kind of larger type data migrations? We're not talking just, putting some Excel spreadsheets in. We're talking about moving from one CRM to another CRM. How much time does that really take?
Well, if they're using the one CRM today, and let's say they're going to Salesforce, the fact that they're using it today means that we need to do 2 data migrations. We have to do a test and a final, because the idea is during the test, we're going to uncover a lot of things around how to prepare the data, how we're going to load the data, how we're going to deal with issues, errors, blah, 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 blah. So that test could take 4 to 6 weeks to test it because it's got to be prepared, blah, blah, blah. So I always tell prospects, you tell me how long the data migration will be, and I'll tell you how long the project will be. Because the idea is if they're using a CRM today, when you move them into production, you want that data migration to be very quick, where it doesn't take days. So maybe they're down a day or what have you, but it's not the end of the world. But you can't have them down for a month. So that's why there's typically 2 done. Now, a data migration from one CRM system to another could easily take 8 weeks when you think about the test and then the final. Okay, now the project will probably take longer than that, but the biggest thing is people underestimate how much time they need to dedicate to data migration and preparing the data and getting it ready and working with us. Because as we load data, let's say we're loading contacts associated to an account and we get an error file. We give it back to them and say, here, you got to clean this. And then they got to clean it. And then let's say we load 1,000 people, or we try to, and we get 950 in. So we have 50 errors. Give it back to them. They then go through, fix the errors. We load that 50, and maybe now we only have 10 errors. So there's also a big price between good enough and perfect. Okay. And when you think about data migration, if you want it perfect, it's really going to take a lot more time. Oftentimes what I tell people is, can you get a backup of your data? And if so, you could always refer to it, but oftentimes good enough is much more cost effective than perfect. So, but do not underestimate how much time it takes, because we really need somebody on the client that can allocate time. And it could be, from a client standpoint, 20 to 40 hours over the course of a project to work with us. But it's not 2, it's not 4. And oftentimes, sometimes, that may be all they're allocated for, and that's not enough.
And in the end, it's worth it to have that clean data.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for being here with us today. That's all the questions that I have for you on Salesforce and those challenges between migrating from different CRM systems. So thank you for being here again. We hope to have you back on soon, Matt. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone. Get out there and vote. We'll see everybody on Thursday. Bye.